So we're going to be talking about can traditional IGA and PAM solutions address NHI risks. Alon Jackson, CEO of Astrix, is going to be hosting this panel discussion. We have Arki from Okta, Lisa from Rabobank, and then Santosh from Unosecur. So, Jackson, over to you.
Yes. Thank you very much, everyone. Maybe if you're standing, there's a lot of room if you want to. Give another minute. Cool. I think we'll start with a quick round of introductions. So I'm Alon Jackson, the co-founder and CEO of Astrix Security.
Hi, my name is Arkadiusz Krowczynski. I'm Principal Product Acceleration Specialist at Okta.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I am Lisa. I'm a Senior Product Manager for Rabobank.
Hi everyone, I'm Santosh Jayaprakash. I'm the founder and CEO of Unosecur. We are a Berlin-based identity security startup.
Cool. So our session right now will be talking about traditional IAM tools or human identity tools and where they can or cannot help us with different NHI initiatives that we have, or generally solving for the NHI problem that we've been talking about. So let's start maybe with a very easy question here for the panel. Looking at NHI is a big theme that we're talking about. Obviously, we're talking about like traditional IGA, traditional PAM solutions, right? Where do you feel generally these kind of traditional solutions fall short in terms of managing non-human identities?
So for myself, I think the key word here is traditional, right? Because I think a lot of those discussions that's here today, they do talk about there are general identity governance principles that you can apply to NHIs. But then when you look at, for example, the traditional IGA architecture, just take the use case of identity management. In the traditional identity management of human identities, you have an HR source connected to an IGA. This is hardly, unfortunately, not the case for NHIs. NHIs exist everywhere, and unfortunately, not in one single place. You hope that it is somewhat covering your CMDB, but that's often not the case. They're usually created, identity are created also in your VMware, CMDB, and your cloud as well. And if you take traditional PAM, I think traditional PAM, you think about, okay, I take all my, let's look at my jewel, the crown jewels of my organization, the most privileged identities I put in the vault. That line becomes quickly blurred when it comes to non-human identities, because often or not, it's hard to find the differentiation of privileged versus non-privileged when you start looking into these non-human accounts. But does that make sense to put everything in your PAM tooling? I don't necessarily think that is the wise idea, because when you start treating everything the same, then nothing is really privileged. So I think that's when the traditional, IGA and also PAM tooling really fall short when you look at really covering the whole NHI identity lifecycle that Lalit also mentioned in his opening statement this morning.
Cool. So, we work with a lot of CISOs. So, 3 years ago, IT was the buyer for all identity platforms, and today it's the CISO, right? So things have changed. And I think the traditional PAM is generally very static, and it doesn't bring any dynamic context to the customers today. And most of the visibility part, and also bringing, for example, you have different cloud stack, private cloud, on-prem, plus you have SaaS applications. Even for human, it's hard to get a dynamic visibility. Now, if we speak about non-human identities, it just increases the complexity so high. Now, how do you bring all of this in one place and then you can solve it? So I think the static or the dynamic context makes a lot of sense. And then I think threat defense teams are looking for real-time solutions. And I think traditional PAM doesn't bring that level of permissioning aspects that you currently see. So I really see that the static versus the dynamic aspect is where a traditional PAM fails, and then those implementation long time, and also installing agents, sensors. These are the rollouts take a lot of time, and then by the time they do that, customers evolve. Attackers evolve, right? So they bring new scenarios. So the static or the dynamic aspect definitely is falling short in traditional PAM.
Yeah. So definitely all the topics were covered. So We've heard it several times this week, so we can't protect what we can't see. So first step, it's all about discovery, accessibility, visibility, and in traditional, non-traditional PAM solutions. So it's important, and we learned identity is the heart, identity is what's right, identity is security. So we need to now take care of this NHI stuff definitely.
Perfect. Any questions from the crowd about this? We can make this an interactive session. Yes? Yeah?
I don't need. When you're speaking about PAM solutions, especially those traditional ones, by traditional ones we probably mean evolved. Yeah, because PAM solutions have evolved heavily from those days and can do a lot more things. But still, I mean, when it comes to non-human identities, they probably cannot manage, like PAM cannot manage some complicated kind of non-human identity, like managed identity, like OAuth service principle. PAM cannot do that. No PAM cannot do that, even if it's non-traditional. So I believe the part of non-human identities addressed by PAM is just a certain one. Maybe those with like user and password based, not much more than that. That's all. That was like a question. Actually, do you agree with that statement?
So let me rephrase that. Can you also just rephrase your question, because it's quite a long statement.
Because we are talking about how can PAM address non-human identities?
Yeah.
I would say yes, but only part of them. When these non-human identities when PAM is used like as a secret manager, and some application goes and extracts the credentials, and then Vault rotates the credential, and that's it when it comes to non-human identities. But that's only one kind of non-human identities that the PAM solution can handle.
Yeah.
Only that sort.
Yeah, indeed. So I think PAM is very useful, definitely, when it comes to credential rotation, when it comes to protecting your key assets. But I think you touch on a very important point. It's just one component in the IAM posture that you have to protect us. Because for NHI, it's also identity. And identity also needs to be covered by all spectrums of IAM capabilities, in which PAM is just wonderful. So definitely agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and also I think, that's a very good statement, right? So, and also the relationship, who's the human creating those NHIs, right? So that relationship is, even with modern solutions, you don't see that. Who are those humans who are creating those NHIs? What are those relationships? You don't get it, you don't take that in any traditional PAM for NHIs.
Any other questions on this? Yep.
I guess my question would be, what would be unique about NHI lifecycle processes that are different, for example, compared to like managing humans, that makes the NHI problem more complex and more difficult for a traditional IGA or PAM solution to solve? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, with a human identity, in a way, the problem of managing joiner mover leaver is simple. And I say it in very, very relative terms. Because when you have a human identity, you get onboarded to the HR system, and when you resign or leave the organization, the digital identity also leaves, always gets disabled. That is unfortunately not the case when it comes to machine identities, because when a machine or a server, whatever you want to call it, gets created, most often than not it's created by somebody who also, again, goes through that life cycle of leaving and joining an organization, being in some sort of function, and perhaps leaving the job. But the machine accounts or machine identity created gets often forgotten. And that's when you have a situation in which you have accounts that's left there without any sort of ownership. And that's, I think, what makes the NHI a trickier problem when it comes to managing identities, is that ownership is often an issue when it comes to, for example, whoever that creates the account, should it be the one that ultimately rotates the credentials, or should the person, and how do you actually then track the lineage of that account as to who gets to decommission that account post the identity being away actually from the organization. So I think from that perspective, it is I think a very challenging issue.
Here it is, and point number one is the visibility, so discovery. It's not a one thing I will do in 24 hours, so it's constantly monitoring and checking, as you mentioned. So NHIs were created by humans, forgotten, so we need to have the maximum visibility, checking constantly to be on the safe side of the house. I think this is the important part.
I think the lifecycle metrics, right? So those are important for all those long-lived credentials that are in your systems. But then, not every obviously you need to have good integrations with your vault to make sure that you can recycle them or get those out of the system. I think those integrations also matters, right? So you can get the lifecycle metrics, you get the visibility, but then how do you remediate it, right? So you can see something. Visibility is the most important aspect, but then the remediation, closing the loop, right? So closing the human, non-human loop. I mean, that would also make much more sense to a lot of customers.
Guys, you're making my job very easy. This is good.
Would it be helpful to manage the repositories where you find the identities, the NHIs? For example, manage, you have a cloud platform, so that would be a location that they can produce. You have a VM platform. So managing the locations or basically repositories, would that help support at least the challenge that we are facing here today?
Definitely yes, but that's a hard engineering problem, right? I mean, how do you bring all of that in one place? But yeah, definitely with those logs you can bring a lot of visibility, and then but then again, how do they all communicate, right? So this interaction and integration part would definitely, I'm looking more from the engineering side of things, how do you make it work, practicality, but from the logs, yes, definitely, right? So then it definitely is solvable, yeah.
Good question. Good question.
Yeah. And then I think from my side, I think it's not about trying to manage where identities are being created, but I think for me the most important thing is having visibility and control over where those identities are, what they are, how many there are, what ownership it has. Because I think you're just going to make your life very miserable if you try to centrally control what it is created, especially in the engineering context. But I think as an IAM department, we do have the vital duty to make sure that these identities are properly controlled against the IAM safeguard that we create as part of the policies that we create as for security. So I think that's where it lies.
Can I add to my own question?
Of course, Alex.
I think there are two pieces to the puzzle, right? So if you know where they get created and you manage that is one point. But the next thing is there's somebody triggering, let's say, the creation of it, and hopefully it's within your own ecosystem. So to some extent you should have some control or visibility who actually did that.
Yep.
So I think you could also support that with your ownership. At least you have some traceability and part of the development team, meaning product owner X is basically take him nail him to the wall, right? So you can say that's at least a way to do it. But that was just an idea on the puzzle.
I think there's one thing to add, because I'm talking about visibility, how many accounts that we have. Well, that's one side of the problem, but then where are they used? You may see an identity hard-coded in 50 scripts, right? So there's a scanning problem, hard-coded credentials, how do you then fix that problem, right? I guess that's another area that's a big difference, right? Comparing human to non-human. Do you want to talk about that side of the challenge around hard-coded credentials, 24 million secrets found in GitHub from GitGuardian's report last year? There's a massive secret sprawl problem. What are your views on that when it comes to sort of IGA and PAM?
Yeah, so we just launched our GitHub integration, right? So we do NHI for GitHub. So that's one way to solve it. So you cannot avoid the identity sprawl in NHI. I think Astrix is also working on the space for a long time. You can see that. Engineers are going to make mistakes, and they are going to create. Those unnoticed, long-lived credentials are going to be there. I think bringing some visibility monitoring mechanism is the only way you can do that, right? So and then integrating, having all those checks and balances, probably your 4A principles or approvals and stuff. But then that slows down your engineering velocity if you bring too much processes in place. But then yeah, that's one way of looking at the problem and solving it. But with all the hardcore credentials, I think the only way is how soon can you figure out and how soon can you stop the exposure, right? So first, not many people know how many API keys are available. Now, the second problem is what are those? Okay, first problem is what are those keys? Sorry, how many exist and who created it and what is exposed? Nobody has this visibility, right? So now bringing that in itself is going to solve this problem.
All right, thank you. Great discussions here. Let's go back to the basics. Let's talk about identity and what is identity, right? When we're talking about non-human identity, so talking about secret scrolling, obviously, the same secret will be copied and will be leaked and might be used by different workloads or from different locations by an attacker abusing the same credential. Or service accounts, right, might be used by different services on the same account because people are busy, people are lazy. It's part of the world, really, right? So one, I think what is identity for you? What defines the non-human identity, right? And then when looking at the behavior of that NHI, how is it maybe different from monitoring behaviors of humans? We can go ladies first, or.
Yeah, but then your question is what, to me, constitutes an identity? Is that the
Yes,
question that you have?
Yep.
I think, it's quite, I think it's also with Coping and Cole, I think they do draw an identity fabric, right? So for me, identity is a persona of something, whether that is a human or a machine or an AI agent, is somebody that is trying to have access to the assets you have within your organization. So for me, that constitutes identity. It's just a container of an entity that requires access to your organization, and whether or not he or she or it has a right to do that.
Maybe I'll answer the second part. So identity is security, right? I think that's what we all stand for now. So definitely anything that's authentic. But the second part of the question, the service accounts, right? So Terraform, CloudFormation, everything gets admin rights. Now, do we have any visibility into what they do? Some engineer would have created 8 years ago some Terraform which is still in your AWS account, and real-time monitoring. I think that's the only way. And I think the activity-based, behavior-based permissioning would make sense in such cases, and I think that would be one way of solving this problem.
Yeah, as you mentioned, identity is security, and again, the visibility and especially the remediation that you talked about. So all these things comes together with access control to end, last but not least, govern and remediate all the access. So it's something, it's identity, and it's a heart of everything at the moment.
Any questions from the crowd? Yes.
About the activities, I just wanted to say that the IGA covers one part of controlling the NHIs, and that's how many are they, what kind of, or maybe where they are, in best case who have created them, but not what have they been doing, which is an important aspect of when we should decide if we should decommission them or not. And we do that in the IGA. So far I haven't heard of integrations from the IGA, where they are, who they are, and then from the IDP, how have they been used, for AD or something, in combination should make a basis for a decision to decommission them or not. So I wonder if there are any tools doing that comprehensive analysis that you know of.
So if I understand it right, so any solution that's solving this problem?
Yeah.
So real-time monitoring, there are a lot of platforms that does, right? So I think even, actually Microsoft is even deprecating their permissioning management, which is what we learned. So it's definitely there should be something out there. So we do some aspects of it with our platform. I'm sure a lot of other platforms does cover a lot of it. Because there's a lot of data ingestion that you have to do at that scale. Let's say you have 10,000 AWS accounts that you need to monitor in one place and then right-size them. that's still not easy at that scale, right? So, and then doing it real time, that brings even more like latency and how you do that. But it's definitely doable, I'm sure. We do that with certain scale, and a couple of other vendors do that as well.
I think currently the NHI market is growing, right? And I think there's a lot of disagreements over whether it's a non-human identity, machine identity, or even workflow identity, whatnot. But then there's one thing that they can all agree on, is that currently there is no vendor that does everything. So I think from that perspective, I think it's about how do you organize the ecosystem, the capabilities and toolings that you have within your ecosystem, and making sure that actually fits to the security posture that you have. So for example, if you do want to monitor basically the activity of your NHIs, you could probably take an IDDR solution and try to look at the behavior of these NHI. But then I think that was really looking into what are the capabilities that you need and making sure that you orchestrate and making sure that there is a solution and that fits your use case.
I think we had another one there. Yep.
I don't need a microphone as well. So, yeah, I resonate with all the start with introducing myself. My name is Sean. I'm from BP. So I resonate with all the problem statements. It's hard to find an authoritative source of lifecycle of those NHIs. Current PAM solution doesn't scale to cover all the non-human credentials. And the existence of so many different platforms and systems, and each can have their own native non-human identities. We have the cloud IDPs, which a lot of systems consume for non-human identities. So we face similar issues. I look after PAM and enterprise secrets management, and more I found myself being drawn into the non-human identity realm, because it's easy to tag a field accounts with a human being, then lifecycle control those accounts with the human being the employment lifecycle of the human being. What we approach is we try to tie the non-human identity to our CMDB as a authoritative source, as you've just described, Lisa. And it quickly became a infrastructure discovery problem.
And update and maintenance.
Yes. And we have to, it's like chasing ghosts. Yeah. Oh, there's something. Oh, this is something. And there's no centralized discovery tool because these systems don't necessarily talk to each other. And if we want to achieve that level of sentient, we have to have a master root credential across all our infrastructure and constantly pulling for our identities, and then combine it with ITDR. And that quickly ballooned our problem. So I'm here to find solutions. I'm also sharing our approach as well.
This is perfect. We're here for you.
Yes, so I guess I don't have any particular specific questions, but out of the three, as you said, problem of discovery, once we discover them, how do we govern them? What kind of master source, we can tie the native accounts with the life cycle of the system, then the owner of the system becomes the owner of these NHIs. That's what we kind of solve the problem the easy way. What about the others? The shadow IT, shadow AI, things that run on the cloud that we have no idea, but they create single sign-on credentials that's used for those shadow AIs. I mean, I'm scared. That's what keeps me awake. So I'm here for this.
I think what we're saying here is NHI is a very, very complex problem. We've got hyper-fragmentation in the market with cloud, SaaS, on-prem, microservices. There isn't an easy answer here, right? So you have to think about how you tackle the elephant in the room, and maybe some existing solutions might help you, right? There are new solutions that are moving very fast in solving a lot of the life cycle issues. But it is still a huge challenge of where do you go, what is the way to tackle this problem? And the root cause is, it's static secrets. Right? So your mission in life needs to be to try and move away from static secrets to dynamic secrets. All of our issues, because things are static, they get forgotten, they're not owned, and those can get compromised. So you need to start balancing getting control of your existing stack and then start moving strategically with your most important systems, agentic AI, you get to a dynamic zero trust model would be our recommendation.
Don't know if that's an answer or another question there, or both.
Well, basically, something complementary. There's also a cultural problem. Because if you look at it from the perspective of HR, basically people come in, they join, they transfer, they leave. Basically, we have a structure, so we have toll gates, right? So people go through toll gates. But actually, when we're spinning up NHIs, they don't come out of nowhere, right? So we have people that actually activate something, and that's culture. We need to also address the cultural point of it, that we set the same toll gateways, for example, with a deployment. Also hook into IAM, and onboard this new NHI to IAM. So what I'm saying is, it's not all, yes, it is also all the things that have been mentioned here, and it's a technological problem, and we have limitations here and there. But there's also things that we, let's say, from a process or a cultural perspective, can do, I think, to help this at least. And it's complementary. It's not a one size fits all, but I think it can help also in this challenge we face here. Yeah.
I want to touch on an aspect that sometimes is a bit overlooked, and that's the fact that a lot of these non-human identities many times are actually third-party services, right? And we're introducing them, they get access to the enterprise, a variety of names for that. It could be a plugin, an add-on, an extension, third-party service again, right, that gets access to the account. Sometimes we connect them through a service account, sometimes it's more of a native connection there, right? And I think someone talked to me before about like OAuth, right? So when you have like an OAuth consent screen, right? You click it, enable permissions to this new service. There's actually not a credential you can vault, right? It's really this kind of a cloud-to-cloud connection, if you like, right? So I'd like to share the questions with everyone. We'll start with the panel. How do you kind of manage this kind of third-party risk, right, or third-party NHI connections today?
This is a big industry problem. I think especially the browser extensions that you mentioned, it's a big problem. We come across it. I think browser-based identity controls could be one way to solve it. I think there are a couple of, like push security is one that I came across. They do that. I think that's one way of solving it, but I think it's a big problem. But at the same time, I see that, for us, with working in this, we do a lot of R&D and looking at all those connectors that you build, or I think as many integrations can you build and do more R&D to those systems. I think that's the only way to go about it, right? So the more integrations you can do, the better visibility you get, the better you can solve this problem. And also giving, not every service account gets admin right. How can you right size it even before you give that access? I think that's another way to also make sure that systems get only what level of access they need so they can do that function. Right? We do that for humans, how about bringing the same mindset to a non-human? I think that could also solve the problem. Right? So we have a couple of these approaches, I think, would be the way forward.
Yeah, and then for me, I think a third-party identity is still an identity type you need to manage as part of any organization. So I think even if it's a third-party account that is sitting in a SaaS application, I think you still do have a right to understand and discover what accounts actually lies within those third-party apps. And then be able to then, based on a risk-based approach, be able to determine, okay, should those accounts be actually allowed to my organization? But I think that this is where the discovery capability still becomes important, because you still need to understand what lies in those third-party applications that you bring into your organization. So from that perspective, treat it as any identity that requires access to your organization, and be able to, and then implement the policy that's required to basically do IAM on those.
Thank you very much for the panel and for the great discussions over here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackson, for hosting this session. Santosh, Lisa, Arki. Clearly, a lot of questions about this topic. There were no clear answers. It's a huge challenge. Look,